giving this lecture. Let me introduce Dr. Adham. Dr. Adham is a professor of chemistry and the Dean of Graduate Studies faculty at Yusuf Al-Jamil Science and Technology Research Center. Dr. Adham obtained his bachelor degree from AUC in '91 with a major in chemistry and a minor in computer science. I didn't know about this, computer science. Dr. Adham was the recipient of the University President Cup for the highest ranking student of his graduating class. He went to graduate studies at Cambridge University, UK, where he obtained his PhD in physical chemistry in 1996. In 1997, Dr. Adham joined the Egyptian Environmental Affairs Agency, Ministry of State for Environmental Affairs, and in 2000, he moved to the field of private environmental consultancy. During his environmental career, Dr. Adham was involved in a number of national and international initiatives concerned with environmental management. In 2003, Dr. Adham joined the Department of Chemistry at AUC, and Dr. Adham is a chartered chemist and chartered scientist. He's a member of the Royal Society of Chemistry and the Society of Chemistry and Industry, the American Chemical Society, the International Society, and the International Association of Solid Waste Management. I would like to thank Dr. Adham again for accepting to give us this delicious lecture. And I also want to invite you for the coming lecture. It's on March 30. It's called Education and Social Change, Does Civil Society Matter? The lecture will be given by Dr. Helen Reiser. She's the Associate Professor of Sociology at AUC. Thank you all again, and thank you, Dr. Adham, and Dr. Dina Borai, the Dean of the School of Continuing Education, will talk about the lecture.
Well, I'm not going to talk about the lecture as much as I want to say how honored and privileged we are to have Dr. Adham Ramadan to give us a lecture. يعني دكتور أدهم يعني إحنا محظوظين فعلا. قسم الكيمستري في الAUC is one of the strongest chemistry departments, and I hope you will agree. We have a student here from the department, and he better say that, otherwise he's going to regret it badly. Because of Dr. Adham, we have a very strong chemistry department, and we're very honored that he's giving us this talk today to share with us some of his expertise. And I just want to say, even though Dr. Adham is very young compared to me, we do share something in common. A few years difference. A few years ago, I also took a bachelor degree in chemistry, and I don't know, Adham, do we share the same professors? I hope not. Ya nahar abyad.
I'm not that young.
Anyway, again, welcome to this delicious lecture, as Hala said. And I hope that we will continue to see you every month, inshallah. تشرفونا كل شهر. We have a lecture, a different lecture every month. And here is yet another one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this wonderful introduction. So people are, Dr. Dina's giving me a lot of more credit than I deserve, but it's a pleasure to be here. I actually went to university at AUC, and I spent many years on this campus, Tahrir campus, so it has wonderful memories. So I'm very happy and honored to be here, and it's always a pleasure to come back. So today's lecture is away from environment, away from solid waste, away from pure chemistry. It's an aspect of chemistry that is related to food chemistry, which we actually have a master's degree in. We offer a master's degree in food chemistry at the department on the New Cairo campus, and it is something that is related to that. Of course, being a public lecture, so I've tried in preparing it to make it as sort of simple, as non-chemistry, maybe non-scientific as possible. So for the sort of hardcore scientists in the audience, my apologies in advance. It's not going to be as scientific as you maybe have hoped for. But it's basically, the purpose is just introduce chocolate. I mean, we all enjoy chocolates very much, and thank you thanks to SCE. I think people have sampled some or are sampling some as we speak. But then this lecture is a bit is trying to introduce or give an overall view about chocolate from a science point of view, more than sort of a delicious enjoyment. So maybe we'll start by getting the origin of chocolate, and actually the origin of chocolate is in South America, because the chocolate tree, the cocoa tree, is actually native to South America. And South American Indians the word chocolate comes from a South American Indian language, which is chocolatl, and basically it means bitter water. So their idea was, or their use of it is that they use the beans to actually make a drink that was extremely bitter in taste. And basically the drink is using the seeds of the cocoa tree, which is native to South America. Of course, now, as we'll see, chocolate is being grown, or cocoa trees are being grown in different areas of the world, in Africa and in Southeast Asia. And actually the African market, or the African producers, are the biggest producers. They've overtaken the producers in South America. So basically, there have been archaeological evidence to show that, there are remnants or remains of chocolate, in 3,000-year-old jars in South America, Indian jars. And both Mayan and Aztec Indians, the Mayan Empire lasted from the 3rd to the 10th century. The Aztecs came from the 14th to the 16th, before the collapse with the arrival of the Spaniards. Actually basically crushed the chocolate beans and to make this bitter drink, chocolate. And actually they had this drink, they use it as a rejuvenating drink, and they believed that it was the food of God. So it had religious sort of connotations with it. It was not anything as delicious as what we have now, but they took it as part of a spiritual dimension. The spread of chocolate, actually, in the 16th century, before the 16th century, the Spaniards had discovered South America. They've started actually getting introduced. Well, they resulted in the collapse of a lot of the Indian culture, but they actually caught on to this, or discovered this cocoa tree, and brought back the chocolate beans back to Spain, and to try to make the drink a bit less bitter. It was actually mixed with spices, with sugar, etc. But it was a water-based, so they did not mix it with milk. It was a water-based drink. And from that point on, it started really spreading everywhere else in Europe. So it moved later on in the 17th century, it moved to France, where it became very fashionable in the court of Louis XIV. And Paris became embraced by chocolate mania, so it was a very big thing. And what helped is that people could actually have chocolate during the fasting period just before Easter, people would actually were allowed to have chocolate, so which made it a very popular drink to have during that period. Then we actually, mid 17th century, it became fashionable. It moved to London and it became fashionable there. Then, actually, at the same time, or almost 50 years later, it was arrived to Switzerland in Zurich, and the drink was introduced by the mayor, caught it up on his travels in Europe. In early 18th century, it arrived in Vienna. And really, at the end of the 18th century, it really went back to North America with immigrants and other settlers from Europe. And then two really very important dates for development of chocolate were in the 19th century. And one is 1849, almost the middle of the century, and this was actually the Cadbury brothers, the Cadbury chocolates we all know about, established the chocolate as a solid confectionery. So up till then, people drank chocolate. It was a drink mixed with spices in water. Some people added milk to it afterwards. But then the first chocolate bar actually appeared in 1849. The Cadbury factory had actually manufactured it, introduced it. And of course, the rest is history, but we'll talk about it. And in 1875, almost 25 years later, milk chocolate was introduced. Solid milk chocolate. Before that, chocolate was only dark chocolate, and people added spice to make it maybe less bitter, a bit more tasty. But then the mixing, okay. But then the introduction of milk with the chocolate was later in the 19th century. In the 1900s, actually Switzerland takes the lead. I mean, now people think of chocolate as Belgian and Swiss chocolates. But Switzerland took the lead only in the sort of early, 1900s, very early 20th century. And they actually introduced filled chocolates. So these were chocolates that were filled, the ones we get and enjoy in boxes now. Chocolate, small solid chocolates that were filled with nuts or other fillings. So this was a big invention at the time. And then, of course, 20th century chocolate spread everywhere. I mean, it became one of the most popular sweet food that people actually enjoy. And so far, we still have inventions with different flavors, etc. I don't know whether people are familiar with it, but there are flavors where you actually people put hot chili in it, people put garlic in it. So there are all these experimentations with different tastes that actually, some people like and some people don't like. But so basically, when we talk about to really try to understand why is chocolate so enjoyable, of course, as we'll see during the lectures, sugar is part of it. So, I mean, we all enjoy sweet things, so sugar is one of the factors that make chocolate enjoyable. But then it's not as simple as that. It's when you think about piece of chocolate, if you still have your chocolate from outside, you can put it in your mouth and experiment with what we're saying. But basically, one of the pleasures of chocolate is that when you put it in your mouth, it really melts. And this is something that, it took a lot of time and a lot of work with a number of people involved in the manufacture of chocolate to reach that point, to make a solid, when actually a solid piece of chocolate melt in the mouth. Then, of course, there is the texture. And basically, we all know that the smoother the chocolate in your mouth, the more pleasurable it is. And this is one of the reasons why the majority of consumers prefer milk chocolate, because milk chocolate is much smoother than dark chocolate, which is much more brittle. So, and you don't feel it's granular. You don't feel there are solid bits in it. You put it in there, it's all homogeneous, it's all melting, and it's all very pleasurable. Then, of course, there is the taste. And the taste, of course, there is the sweetness of the sugar, and we'll talk about this. But then, of course, the better quality the chocolate, the more additional taste you feel. So sometimes the chocolate feels a bit bitter, or sometimes it feels a bit acidy, and we'll talk about where this is coming from. But it has high quality chocolate, has a lot of flavors that come in your mouth as you're actually eating it. And then, of course, there is the flow. And the flow doesn't mean how quickly you swallow it, but actually how much you can move it around in your mouth to make it last, the pleasure last as much as possible. And basically, if we have, well, this is someone. His head is chopped in half. And basically, they're eating a couple of nice pieces of chocolate. The chocolates go into the mouth. And for people to, or for us to start enjoying it, actually, they need to melt relatively quickly. If you put a piece of chocolate, I don't know, personally, I've experienced this, but if you put the chocolate in the fridge, and you get it out cold from the fridge, you put it in your mouth, the taste is much less pleasurable. Why? Because it being very cold, it does not melt as quickly or as easily in your mouth as when it's actually at a much higher temperature. So the first step in enjoying the chocolate is that it needs to melt in your mouth. And as it melts in your mouth, there is a flow. So it starts moving around in your mouth. And basically, it starts tickling or triggering different tastes. So basically, a human tongue tastes sweetness at the front, bitterness and sourness at the back of the tongue and the sides, and of course saltiness, which, it does not really with chocolate, although I've had sweet chocolate, or I don't know whether people are familiar with chocolate with salted caramel, which is the biggest thing now, in Europe and the US, where actually there is some salt in caramel in the chocolate. It's actually very nice. So the idea is that the flow makes it move around in your mouth so that it actually triggers all these taste buds in the different parts of the tongue. And the higher the quality of a chocolate bar, the more of these taste buds it will trigger. If the chocolate has a lot of sugar, it will only trigger sweetness. But then if it actually has lower amount of sugar and you need to get the fuller taste, it will trigger typically sourness and bitterness. So sourness is something that is lemony, had'a. So actually, one of the things is that when you're eating dark chocolate, if you think about it, it's not really very bitter. It's very sour, and this is part of the taste that actually gives this fullness to the chocolate. In addition to that, you have all the different flavors. These are due to chemical compounds that what we call volatile. Volatile means they evaporate. They go from the chocolate into a vapor phase that go up from your mouth to the back of your nose. And this gives a full flavor. So it gives you not only the taste, but also the smell of it. And actually, this is all happening in your mouth. So your taste buds are being sort of triggered. You have this smell or aroma of the different compounds due to the different compounds coming out in your nose. So this what would make you actually, or what would make a chocolate bar very enjoyable. So what is it, or what are the ingredients in chocolate that actually, or in a bar of chocolate? Of course, I'm not talking about chocolate drink. It's a whole big different story. But in a chocolate bar, what are the main ingredients that actually help achieve these characteristics that make people enjoy chocolate very much? So one of them is the chocolate itself. And basically, the chocolate is obtained from the cocoa beans. So it's the fruit as we've seen in a picture. And basically, they are beans that look relatively similar to coffee beans. And basically, these beans need to be fermented, dried, roasted, and crushed. Fermented means that actually the beans need to be left, on their own, covered typically with some organic material like, either banana leaves or other types of leaves. And actually what will happen is that there will be some bacterial action that will start taking place. that will actually start decomposing part of the chocolate bean. And this increases the temperature. And as it increases the temperature, what we say is that we kill the bean. The idea of killing the bean is that you want to make sure that the bean would not start sprouting a tree later on in the process. So actually you kill the cotyledon, which is the inner part of the bean that will actually sprout a tree if you leave it unheated. So, and this fermentation results in a number of chemical compounds that are kept within the bean. Following that, the beans need to be dried, and the reason for drying is that you want to make sure that as you're handling the chocolate bean to move it to the other processes that will turn it eventually into a chocolate bar, you want to make sure that it's not going to mold. And basically you need to dry it for that, and we'll talk about it later. Also, you need to control the amount of water in the bar for other reasons. But then, of course, the drying process is also a very, very important but very sensitive process, because if you dry the bean too much, the beans become very brittle, so they'll break very quickly, and then as you're transporting them or handling them from one process to another, they just crumble, which you do not want to do, because as they crumble, all the chemicals that are responsible for the taste or that would become taste actually evaporate, and the bean will have the color of chocolate, but none of the flavors of chocolate. Roasted and crushed. Roasting is actually one of the most important steps in processing a cocoa bean to become a chocolate bar. And the reason is that as you roast it, you actually trigger a lot of different chemical reactions. We call them Maillard's reaction, but it doesn't matter. And these chemical reactions actually result in the chemical compounds that are responsible for flavors in the chocolate. It's very similar reactions with similar compounds, but not exactly the same when you roast coffee. I mean, we all know that if you go by a coffee shop and the roasted coffee smells wonderful, it's this smell of these are the chemicals that give the smell. It's the same with actually frying meat or frying potato chips. Anything that is being cooked results in this Maillard's reaction with heat, and it triggers the different flavors. The chemical compounds are all belonging to the same class, phenolic compounds, but basically they are very different from one material to another, and that's why a fried potato doesn't taste similar to coffee that is being roasted, or a chocolate or a cocoa bean that has been roasted. So, but it's the same process. Then, of course, the crushing is also Then the crushing is also very important, because the crushing will allow this cocoa bean to become small in size and therefore be incorporated with the other ingredients, as we'll see. So the chocolate is the most, it's basically what gives the chocolate bar its taste and its flavor. However, it's one of the most expensive ingredients. So when we talk about manufacturing, this will become important. Then you actually have fats. And the fats in a chocolate mix typically is between 25 and 35% fat. And basically the fat is primarily coming from cocoa butter. And cocoa butter is basically when you have the cocoa bean and when you actually do the process and crush it, etc., a lot of the content of the bean is fat. So the bean is a very fatty plant. The cocoa bean is a very fatty plant. So you get a lot of the cocoa fat. I don't know, I mean, there are things that I think there are lip balms, زبدة cacao. Actually, this is it. It's made out of cocoa bean. It doesn't taste of chocolate at all, because the taste of chocolate is in the bean itself, not the fat. But you get the fat out and you use it, and people use it to make the actual, as fat in the mix. If you have, of course, milk to add it, so you have a milk chocolate bar, this means that in addition to the cocoa fat, you'll have also milk fat. And we'll talk about, maybe later on, about people actually adding other types of fat to try to make it a bit cheaper, a chocolate bar, a bit more affordable for people. So typically, it's the cocoa butter, the milk fats, and other vegetable fats sometimes. Definitely in the very commercial chocolate bars, you'll have a lot of vegetable fats that are added because they are much cheaper. And that's why, a chocolate bar is, I don't know, 3 pounds, 3.5 pounds or 4 pounds. Whereas if you go and buy a Belgian chocolate box or a Swiss chocolate box, it's 10 times or 100 times the price. It's all about the ingredients. And basically, the fats are composed of fat molecules. Fine, people call them triglycerides, doesn't matter. But fat molecules that are quite large in units. They're very large units. And actually these fat molecules, in the process of mixing, will pack themselves or align themselves relative to one another in particular ways, in particular structures. And basically, the way they align themselves results or leads to a particular property of the chocolate. So if they align themselves in a particular way, the chocolate becomes very brittle. If they align themselves in a different way, the chocolate becomes a bit more flowing, etc. So in the process of manufacturing the chocolate, a lot of effort is put to actually make these fat molecules align in the way that will lead to a product that is shiny. So you don't want to have a chocolate bar that looks very dull and not shiny and not, attractive. But also, it will actually make it also, you don't want a chocolate bar that is brittle, crunch. You want it, you bite into it and flows into your mouth. So this is affected by how these fat molecules are aligned together or how they pack together, or what we call in chemistry, how do they crystallize, how do they arrange themselves in a structure within the chocolate mix. And very importantly, also, this is a bit of a schematic diagram. So imagine this is a chocolate bar, and then the chocolate bits are huge, and the sugar is the white circles, and then all this, the rest is fat. And all the chocolate parts, which we call the chocolate beans, or we call them the chocolate nibs, and the sugar particles have to be completely covered with fat. This is what makes the chocolate flow. So if they are not covered with fat, as you bite into it, it will be very granular. You'll feel there are solid bits in your mouth that are not particularly nice to chew on. They will taste nice, but the texture is not going to be very attractive. So actually, and part of the processing of the chocolate is to make sure there is a lot of mixing and a lot of agitation and a lot of moving around of the melted chocolate to make sure that all the other ingredients or particles in the chocolate mix are covered with fat. Then we actually have the sugars. So actually the sugars, this is added sugar. So actually it constitutes about 50% of the chocolate bar. Sugar is one of the cheapest ingredients in a chocolate bar. So the most expensive is the chocolate, the cocoa fat, or the cocoa butter, the other fats, and then the sugar. So typically, a milk chocolate bar that has milk and a lot of sugar will be much cheaper than a dark chocolate bar that will be of a higher quality. At the same time, if you actually have a commercial chocolate bar and a sort of a special high quality chocolate bar, one will be much sweeter than the other one. Of course, sugar and sweetness is something that people like very much. So some people enjoy better a very sweet chocolate bar than a less sweet one, a bitter one, or a sour one. But basically, the sugar is used to add to the chocolate or the chocolate bar, other than making it cheaper. It's actually useful in a number of things. Sugar as a material absorbs other chemical compounds more easily, so it absorbs flavors very easily. So, for example, if you have a bowl of sugar and you put it in the fridge, and in the fridge in the fridge at home, or you put it in a container next to something that has garlic, overnight the actual sugar will have caught the aroma of garlic. So sugar is very good in catching compounds or catching chemical compounds that have responsible for taste. So the presence of sugar inside the chocolate mix actually helps capture a lot of the chemical compounds that are responsible for the taste. All what has been produced by the roasting rather than, because I mean, after roasting you process it, so rather if you didn't have sugar, a lot of these chemical compounds will just vaporize and you lose a lot of the taste. So adding sugar captures these and actually holds them into the chocolate mix. However, as a result of this capturing ability of the sugar also captures water from the atmosphere, water vapor, dampness, humidity very easily. And when sugar, I don't know whether people have experienced it, if you leave a bowl of sugar outdoors when it's humid, overnight, you'll come back and it will become one solid lump. So it absorbs the water or the humidity and it all sticks together. So in a chocolate bar, if the sugar is allowed to absorb humidity, the chocolate bar, rather than becoming flowing and nice in your mouth, it will become very, very chewy and extremely hard to flow. So the one thing in manufacturing or in making a good chocolate bar is you want to make sure, you want to use the sugar because it has a lot of advantages, but then you want to make sure that the sugar does not get in contact with any water. And to do that, typically, the sugar is covered with the fat. So that's why when the sugar is added, it's mixed properly with the cocoa butter, the milk fat, if there is milk, so that actually the fat covers completely the sugar particle, as we've seen and we'll see again. And basically, so I mean, the sugar will be surrounded completely, covered completely with fat, so that as you make the chocolate and leave it, somebody manufactured the chocolate and they've got it out on the market, it needs to have a relatively long shelf life. You don't want it to go bad within 2 days. You want it to last for a year or for 6 months, depending on the quality of chocolate. So you want to make sure that actually the sugar does not absorb humidity. And the simplest way of doing that, you cover you make sure that the sugar particles are covered with the fat. Of course, sometimes people use something called emulsifiers. This is a chemical compound that will also do the same thing, and it's cheaper than fat. So there are all these substitutes that manufacturers use to actually decrease the cost. But typically, the idea is that you want the sugar to be isolated within the structure so that water would not reach it. Then, actually, if you have milk in milk chocolate, in addition to, if it's in dark chocolate, these are the ingredients typically you have: the chocolate nibs or the chocolate itself, powder, the fat, which is basically the cocoa butter, and the sugar, of course, unless people add nuts and other things. But this is a plain chocolate bar. If you have milk added to it, then in addition to all what we've seen, of course, there will be milk fats in the chocolate, but also there will be milk proteins. And really the milk proteins is what gives this feeling of creaminess in your mouth, because of the nature of the milk protein and how they actually interact with the other ingredients. You have this sort of creaminess in your mouth. And more importantly, it actually balance or overcomes the acidic taste of the chocolate bean. Again, if you actually have a dark chocolate, pure dark chocolate, it's not bitter, it's sour. And the sourness is coming from the fermentation process that took place to start with. And the sourness, there are different processes that take place to get rid of a lot of the sourness, but it never goes. If you add milk, and milk fats would actually balance or neutralize this sourness. So if you have a dark chocolate, it's sour. If you have a milk chocolate, it's much less sour, even if it has the same amount of sugar. So going back to what the process of swallowing or enjoying a piece of chocolate in one's mouth, keeping this in mind that there are these different ingredients, and these different ingredients are all contributing to the different properties, So melting of in the mouth, this is one of the very important parts in enjoying a solid chocolate bar. Melting in the mouth is resulting from the fat that is in the chocolate. Typically the triglyceride molecules that are there due to the cocoa butter and or the fat protein, and the fat protein if it's there, and any the milk fat if it's there, and any additional fats that might be added to make the chocolate a bit less expensive. So this is what actually results in melting in the mouth. And this is because why does it melt in the mouth? Because actually the chocolate, your mouth is at 37 degrees, the body temperature. And at 37 degrees, the chocolate solid, chocolate origin is a liquid. So all the manufacturing process deals with a liquid. And as it cools down, it actually solidifies. Anybody who's tried, a chocolate cake or some chocolate sweets or desserts at home, you need to heat it on the stove or under hot water or over hot water so that it doesn't burn. And then when you leave it, it sets. So actually at 37, the chocolate is in a liquid state. And this is why, of course, here when it's hot weather in Egypt, for example, in summer, then you buy a piece of chocolate, you leave it outside the fridge for 3 minutes, and it's a completely liquid because it's definitely above 37 degrees. So it comes into your mouth. If it doesn't have enough fat, it will remain solid for a much longer period. But of course, humans, as we are, we want instant gratification when we put the chocolate piece in our mouth, and we want it to melt right away to really enjoy the taste. So the fat plays that role. The other important property is smoothness. You don't want to put a piece of chocolate in your mouth and it feels granular. And basically, really the texture and the smoothness of the texture is mainly due to the fats completely covering the chocolate parts as well as the sugars. So it all mixes well in your mouth. The other thing that is very useful in achieving this is actually the size of the chocolate nib or the chocolate powder or the chocolate bean itself when it's crushed. The smaller the size, the smoother the chocolate is. And basically that's why a lot of manufacturers actually crush the beans and then mill the beans, etc., to make sure that they are in a powder form that is around what we call, 30 microns. 30 microns means 30 over 1,000 of a millimeter. So they're very small. They're very small in size. And the small size combined with the coverage of these beans in fat will actually make sure that as you put it in your mouth, you don't feel granularity, and therefore you have the smooth, milky texture that, combined with the flavor, results in a very successful mixture. And basically, as the chocolate is melting and it's moving around in your mouth, then all the flavor molecules that result in the flavor, that are responsible for the flavor, the chemical compounds that are responsible for it, are all released. And they're released from the sugar, as the sugar is actually released from the mixture, and even it's released from the chocolate parts. And as they're released, of course, you taste them in your mouth, the different tastes, but then, of course, they go up into your nose or the nasal cavity, and you actually have the aroma or the smell of this. So it gives you a full sort of enjoyable experience of the chocolate as a whole. And, of course, the flow is the sugar and the fat present that actually control. The fat makes it flow more easily or quicker. The sugar makes it flow less, because as it goes into the mouth, the sugar starts getting in contact with the saliva, which is water-based, and as a result, it actually makes... So the ratio of sugar to fat is very important in controlling the flow of the chocolate in your mouth. More fat will make it flow very quickly, you don't want it to flow very quickly because, if I'm a chocolate manufacturer, I want to make sure that people have the chocolate in their mouth as long as, you don't want it in your mouth for 2 days, but as long as possible to make it very enjoyable. So actually, if you don't have enough, or if you have too much fat, you'll swallow it very quickly. And on the other hand, if you don't have enough fat, it will stay there in your mouth, and it's like a piece of candy, so it becomes a bit problematic. So people control the ratio of sugar to fat to make it flow or control the flow in the mouth. So basically, these are very simple sort of the very simple or the very basic parts about what constitutes a chocolate bar, or what do people do, manufacturers, what do they actually control or play around with to try to make a product that is very enjoyable, presented in a very simple way. But of course, if people have specific questions later on, I'll try and answer them. But then the next thing is that why do we all enjoy chocolate very much? Why is it that is one of the most popular and most enjoyable, actually, food that people have? People sometimes call it comfort food. Of course, the main reason why we biologically enjoy the chocolate is because of the sugar in it. So a lot of sugar in it, sweetness, or the sugar actually releases what we call endorphins. Endorphins are natural hormones in your body that make you feel happy and make you feel satisfied, pleased, let's put it this way. So this is one of the reasons, but again, a chocolate is far more pleasant to consume than a spoon of sugar. So there is definitely more than the sugar present. And there are more than 300 chemicals within a chocolate mix that will actually trigger a lot of different chemicals or chemical reactions in your body. We'll just look at a couple of these chemical compounds or chemical molecules, and one of them is tryptophan, and tryptophan is something that is actually it's a biochemical, and it is existing in chocolate, and it is a precursor, or it's something that turns into, through chemical reactions in the body, to serotonin. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter, so it's a chemical that is responsible for transmitting the signals along the nervous system between neurons. And serotonin actually when it helps this in the process of neurotransmission, it actually gives you a sense of happiness, a sense of satisfaction, a sense of pleasure. And away from chocolate, sometimes people take barbiturates, some pills that will make them feel antidepressant or make them happy, and then these pills or barbiturates will actually replace the natural serotonin by other chemicals to make people feel calm, satisfied, pleased, and of course they end up with an addiction problem, because then their body stops producing serotonin. So, because sometimes people say, oh, is chocolate addictive? Yes. No, it is not addictive. It's not chemically addictive. It's it's psychologically addictive. A psychological addiction is that you get used to the pleasurable feeling you feel when you eat it. There isn't a biological dependency on chocolate, but you eat this, it makes you feel happy, then you want more of it. And it's psychological sort of addiction to chocolate rather than a biological one. So this is one of the chemicals that are definitely present in chocolate that will help you make you feel happy. Another one is phenylethylamine, and this is a type of amphetamine. And amphetamine, again, it's a type of chemical that would also there are drugs, of course. If people have, if their body does not produce enough of them, actually people can take it as a food supplement, and basically people get it prescribed, not in chocolate, but get it prescribed as pills to actually regulate mood swings, etc. So again, it's a neurotransmitter. So it is actually it's involved in transmitting neural signals in your nervous system, and it gets you this feeling of well-being, contentment, and a lot of people say, oh, it's the same feeling as being in love. So sometimes if people are not in love, they can actually eat a chocolate bar. At least this is what a lot of the chocolate adverts like to suggest, that people are better off not being in love. They're better off in a situation where they just eat lots of chocolate. So far from the truth. But another third chemical, which is particular to chocolate because it only exists in cocoa beans, is theobromine. And theobromine actually For those who are a bit scientifically versed, think it's a compound that contains bromine, which is not very healthy. But theobromine, it comes from it's not bromine, but theobromine is a chemical that was actually discovered to be present in the cocoa butter in the 19th. I mean, it's been there for a long time, but people discovered it in the 19th century. And basically, Theo is God, and bromine comes from broma, and broma means the food, and it comes from the idea of the chocolate or the cocoa bean that South American Indians had, is that it's the food of God. So it's a chemical that is very, very specific to chocolate, and it's a stimulant. And actually, theobromine actually can be prescribed individually as a medication or as a food supplement for improving circulation of blood, increasing the size or dilating the size of the blood vessels, and as a stimulant to the heart. So, and basically, of course, South American Indians did not know about theobromine, but they knew of the effect of eating chocolate, especially that they actually consumed it without any sugar, without any other without roasting it, so they did not really process it in a way that released all the other flavors, but definitely they knew when they actually consumed it, they were stimulated. So they had a stimulation, and it gives you what we call the buzz. So theoretically speaking, if you eat lots of very good quality chocolates in the evening, you'll have a buzz that might not make you sleep very well. On the other hand, of course, people say, oh, but I eat chocolate and I go to bed. Of course, because we mostly eat chocolate that has very little chocolate in it, a lot of fat, a lot of sugar, so you're satisfied and happy with the other things, and probably you go to bed very, very happy. So these are the three. I mean, there are hundreds more, but I've just decided to focus on the three most important ones. And basically, when you combine them together, eating a piece of chocolate would probably help you to get a buzz, so you're all energetic afterwards, but also it will help you feel content and happy, and maybe will make you feel as if you're in love, probably with the chocolate bar. So the question is that, a lot of people ask about this, and there are lots of discussions about this, is chocolate good for you? Because actually there are all these very good ingredients in it. Is it good to eat a chocolate? Well, actually, when you talk about a chocolate bar, the sugar and high sugar and fat content is not healthy. Well, if you eat it with moderation, it's okay. But if you eat 10 chocolate bars a day, the sugar content and the fat content have very, very negative health impacts. However, if you actually look at dark chocolate, so dark chocolate has very less fat, because it doesn't have any milk, so the fat is all vegetable fat, which is coming from the cocoa butter, from the cocoa bean as a cocoa butter. Actually, and typically dark chocolate would contain less sugar, just by default. And basically it contains antioxidant agents, and I think everybody knows antioxidants, or heard about antioxidants, and it's the big buzzword about how, health food. And people talk about antioxidants, preventing a lot of things, cardiac health, maintaining blood vessels, control high blood pressure, prevent cancer, etc. Antioxidants don't only exist in chocolate, so it exists in a lot of different food, and definitely, eating a chocolate bar a day will not prevent cardiac problems and will not prevent cancer, but definitely antioxidants in dark chocolate are useful. With this, I'll actually come to conclude the lecture, and then we'll open the floor for whatever questions or discussions you have. Thank you very much. There was a question at the back, and Dr. Dina at the front.
I'm very curious about the origin of drink as the Maya or people from Central America was drinking. I mean, you say it has no sugar at all and it's very bitter, etc. But do we see it served anywhere now?
No.
Because the Spaniards also like
Yes, I mean, the idea was that drink was actually grinding the cocoa butter without roasting it and boiling it in water. The problem with this drink, of course, other than it being bitter, the texture is quite nasty. Because when you do that, a lot of the cocoa fat in the bean will start coming out in the hot drink. So it will be actually a water that is dark in color, that has the chocolate beans, powder or chunks floating in it, and it will actually be covered with a layer of fat. And chocolate fat does not taste of chocolate, it just tastes of fat. Having said that, I don't know, I mean, I'm not an archaeologist, but I think it was attractive to South American Indians for the effect of it. So they thought of it less of a pleasure and more of a stimulant that actually is related to religious ceremonies, etc. But and when the Spaniards actually took it to Spain, they still used it. They still actually prepared the drink in water, not in. But then they've obviously added to it spices and sugar, etc. And then very quickly afterwards, people started using milk to dissolve the fat of the bean in another medium that will make it less lumpy. But it will be interesting to get cocoa beans and try it out.
Okay, I'm sorry, maybe I'm still in the buzz of eating chocolate from outside.
You can have some more.
Well, actually, when I flew to Colombia, I was an exchange student there. So I had the chance actually to be invited by one of my Colombian friends to his farm, and he served several times to us the original chocolate. So it didn't taste as the Belgian hot chocolate we have in a cafe, but as you mentioned, it also has the layer of fat on the top, and it tastes maybe not granola, maybe. But the taste itself or the experience itself, I believe that it's not just the food, it's an experience in your mouth. Okay. The taste you have, the stimulation you have to your emotions, it's really intense to have such a cup of chocolate or cup of coffee, because it was a Eje Cafetero, which is the region of coffee. Yeah. So each morning we spent there around a week, and in the morning we had 2 cups, one for chocolate and one for coffee. So
you were buzzed for the day.
Yeah, that was really amazing. Yeah, so this is my comment about the original original cocoa bean.
Chocolate.
But, chocolate. I have a question. In the beginning, when you were talking about the history of chocolate, you said that you focused on the development of chocolate to
in Europe.
Like in Europe, without mentioning if that effect had the same thing or the same development back in the New World, as they used to call it, given that the Spanish went there, so somehow they were connected with the motherland, so maybe they have experienced differently how the development happened rather than in Europe. So maybe if you have some
the idea in South America, actually, if we talk about South America, in South America there was up till 19th century, the developments were very parallel. So there was a traditional consumption of chocolate, cocoa beans as a drink by the local population, the Indian population, and then all the European settlers actually followed the development in Europe. So spices, then they did spices. Then when it became more fashionable or more in to actually do it in milk, then they started doing it in milk, etc. So the development was basically in South America, the European settlers or the European population followed what happened in Europe, and the local Indian population actually carried on traditionally what happened. In the 19th century, with the development of a solid chocolate, then things started changing.
Okay, one last comment about that. I used to play a game on the computer when I was young. It's called Chocolatier. It even has like trilogy or something. So it was really interesting when I used to travel in the game around the world, how interesting the perspective or the point of view of how to use chocolate is different. Okay. For instance, I used to buy the ingredients from around the world. I would use chili powder as one of the ingredients to put in maybe some Amazonian ants. They think that ants might taste good in there. The way the ads depends on each culture how to use chocolate or what to add to chocolate to make it more local or more closer to the heart. It's really amazing how chocolate was a way of uniting the world even before the computer or the internet. So I believe that chocolate is really a message and a gift from God to us all. Okay, thank you.
Rightly so. I don't think anybody will disagree with you about it being a gift. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about manufacturing. You said that there is cheap chocolate.
Well, less
Yeah.
expensive chocolate and
Less
more expensive chocolate.
and are there standards, Adham? Yani, how,
Yes,
how
there
do
are-
I
yes.
know as a consumer
Yes.
that I'm buying value for my money? How,
Well, it depends what
How do I
value you
know?
want. So no, but basically there will be standards about, for example, there'll be not standards of. So there are standards saying that if the chocolate bar has so many, this is high quality or low quality. But then actually the standards will be controlling the amount of cocoa, the minimum amount of cocoa bean powder in a chocolate, the minimum amount of cocoa butter that is in the chocolate, etc. And so it's the standards or the regulations are about the minimal amount. So, if you don't have, I don't know the numbers, but if you don't have that amount of chocolate beans or that amount of cocoa butter, then you cannot call this a chocolate. You see, but there isn't this classification of saying, it's left really to the consumer and the cost.
Adham, I have. Sorry, can I say it?
Yeah.
I have two questions. One
Yes.
about the pleasure principle,
Yes.
and the other one about the health principle.
Okay.
If it's healthy and has antioxidants,
Yes.
why is it only black chocolate and not white chocolate or not milk chocolate?
Of-
That's one question. The
Yes.
other one about the pleasure principle. Okay, I really love dark chocolate, as you probably know, but I don't like milk chocolate at all. So when you're talking about pleasure, how does it, the same here, somebody else like me,
Yes.
and there are people who are the opposite. They don't like dark, they like white. But if it's the same pleasure principle, why are we reacting so differently?
The thing is that maybe a clarification. White chocolate actually has no cocoa bean, but it has a lot of cocoa fat. So actually, the white chocolate that's why it's white. So it doesn't have the cocoa bean, and it has only cocoa fat. That's why it's called chocolate, because it has the cocoa butter in it.
Yeah.
Dark chocolate and milk chocolate. Personally, I've always, preferred milk chocolate. Yes, exactly. But then, once I sort of got used to dark chocolate, I found it far more pleasurable. And the idea is that it's really the combination of sweetness or sourness that you enjoy more. Dark chocolates are definitely more sour than sweet. And milk chocolates are definitely more sweet than anything else. And typically people prefer something that melts in their mouth. If you're given two dark chocolates, one that melts in your mouth, another one that is very brittle and you have to really crunch, I don't know, but most people will actually prefer the one that melts in the mouth. So it's a sort of I think it's a balance between the different properties. And then some of the chocolate mixes, for example, very dark chocolate. I personally tried, it was a shock at the beginning, I tried, a sort of 90% dark chocolate. It has a texture that is very odd, and the taste is extremely strong. And it's, sometimes people say it's an acquired taste. But I think this is, I don't think there is scientific evidence why people prefer this and that. Manufacturers would do what they call feedback surveys from consumers, and basically to see what consumers like. The majority of people will actually prefer the milk chocolate. Personally, I think because of the sweetness in it. So, if by a raise of hands, we'll just try. Who prefers milk chocolate over dark chocolate? Milk. You prefer milk. Dark chocolate? Ada. Wow. Well, this just proves my theory wrong. Perfect. So, yeah, fine. Dr. Fiel, you had another question. What was your first
the
question?
health principle. You
Yes.
said, and I
Yes.
have heard it from
Yes,
nutritionists
yes,
too,
yes.
that it is the dark chocolate that's
Yes.
antioxidant
Yes.
that prevents this, and it's
It's-
good for the
it's-
heart.
yes.
But why isn't milk
It's all,
chocolate?
it's all about the relative amounts. I mean, if you have a bar of chocolate, that is 100 grams. So this is fixed.
Yeah.
The 100 grams are fixed. If these 100 grams are composed of cocoa butter and chocolate nibs only, then the amount of chocolate nibs in this 100 grams is very high. If you probably you have some sugar in it as well. If you actually add milk chocolate has a significant amount of milk that is added to it, and the fats, etc. So the percent